Another massive multi-trillion-dollar COVID relief bill is passed into law. This time it's $1.9 trillion. My goodness, that's a lot of bananas. And most of you watching this have been distracted by the investment thesis of runaway government spending, so much so that you've completely lost sight of what this is going to mean to your tax bill. Investment positioning versus asset positioning, the problem and the solution, coming up next. I'm DeLegge with ETF Guide TV, and a warm welcome. It's great to see you. Be sure to subscribe to ETF Guide TV. Hit the like button if you've been enjoying our programming. And if you'd like me to analyze and grade your portfolio, reach out to me at portfolioreportcard.com. I'll analyze and grade your investments. Now, no offense, but most of you watching this are grossly ill-prepared for the coming nuclear bomb of higher tax rates. And the only way you can properly shelter yourself is by having correct asset positioning. And that's by getting your money into the tax-free zone right now before, with an emphasis on that word, before tax rates permanently skyrocket. Now today we're just going to do 3 charts because I know that you've got limited time and limited bandwidth, and so do I. But I want you to grasp the kind of fiscal calamity that's coming to this nation due to government overspending. And I'm going to explain the problem to you. We're going to look at these charts. It's going to give you some visuals of what's going on. But I don't want to just tell you about the problem. I want to explain to you the solution for sheltering yourself from the coming storm of surging income tax rates. And that's where this is headed. So put the investment thesis to the side for a minute. We're going to talk about the asset positioning thesis. That's going to be the focus of the conversation today. Now, before we get into the charts, I want to take a quick survey of you, the audience, and I want to ask you, is there anybody anywhere who actually believes that U.S. income tax rates will remain the same or will go down from this point forward? And I want you to tell me, if you believe that, why you believe that, and I also want you to give me some evidence, like a court case. You bring your evidence to the court, you present it, make your argument. Now, those of you that believe that tax rates will be higher in the future, I want you to do the same thing. Post your comments in the section below and give us your thoughts. Tell us why you believe tax rates will be higher in the future. Again, hit the comment section below. I'm going to share with you my thoughts on today's program, and moreover, I'm going to share things that I think are going to help you to get ahead, stay ahead, and keep more of your own money versus putting it in Uncle Sam's pocket. Now, this first chart that I'm going to show you here illustrates a chart that was published by the nonpartisan group known as the Congressional Budget Office, also known as the CBO. And they had just released their budget outlook for 2021 and beyond. And man, I'm telling you, it ain't pretty. But in this chart, you'll notice a few things happening. You don't need to be, first of all, a mathematician to understand this one. And I think if you are a mathematician, all the better. But you'll notice that the growth in government outlays or government spending is outpacing the growth of money that they're intaking or revenues. And this is resulting in a larger budget deficit over the long term. And that's a problem. Real GDP over the next 4 years is only expected to grow at 2.6%. And then after 2026, real GDP drops to about 1.5%, yet government spending continues to rise more at a rapid pace. And when government spending outpaces government revenues over a long and sustained period of time, as you see in this chart, what you have is something called negative compounding. And the final result is not pretty. And by the way, those of you who care about interest rates, the CBO is forecasting the yield on a 10-year Treasury note that's going to jump to 3.4% by the end of this decade. And that's going to be a double from the current yield, which is bouncing between a 1.5% to 2% roughly. So think about that. If yields or rates on the 10-year U.S. Treasury are doubling, well, that means the cost of servicing all that debt is also doubling, which leads us to the next chart. And this next chart you'll see shows us deficit spending by U.S. government growing faster than national GDP. Now, all of us know that you can't spend more than you earn, just as you can't spend your way out of debt. It doesn't matter if you're an individual or if you're a corporation. It doesn't work. And also, it doesn't work if you're a government. You cannot spend your way out of debt. And you'll notice here the purple represents the primary deficit, and then you have a darker purple line, which is at the very bottom, which represents the total deficit. Now, in between these two lines, you'll notice there's a blue line, several blue lines, which represent net interest costs. And it's alarming to see how net interest costs really begin to surge in the middle part of this decade. That's a problem. So what that's saying then is as national debt and unfunded liabilities linked to Social Security and Medicare continue to rise, so does the net interest cost to support all these programs. And I don't care who you are, if you spend more than you earn, there will be a reckoning day. Again, most of you watching this have unfortunately been distracted by the investment thesis of runaway government spending. Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. You've been so distracted by all of this, the investment thesis, that you've completely lost sight of what this is going to mean to your tax bill. And as a result, most of you are ill prepared for the coming nuclear bomb of higher taxes. And the only way that you can properly shelter yourself is by having something called correct asset positioning. It's by getting your money into the tax-free zone before tax rates permanently skyrocket. I've got a diagram I'm going to share with you all about asset positioning in a second, but I'm going to share with you one more chart, and this one shows you U.S. debt as a percentage of GDP. It's already over 100%. It's on pace to double by 2051. And here's the real outlier, not illustrated in this chart. If we have another crisis or another few crises between now and then, and I'm going to wager that we're probably going to have one or two, government debt as a percentage of GDP is going to double well before the projected dates on this screen. So you heard it here first. You heard it here first, the inside scoop. The CBO had this to say: a growing debt burden could increase the risk of a fiscal crisis and higher inflation, as well as undermine confidence in the U.S. dollar, making it more costly to finance public and private activity in international markets. Now, in my January interview on this same channel with David M. Walker, he was a former Comptroller General of the U.S. government, he told me straight matter of the fact. He said, Ron, true national debt is 4 times worse than the headline national figure or national debt figure of 27 trillion. That's the headline figure. He says it's 4 times worse than that headline figure of 27 trillion when you factor in all these other unfunded obligations like Social Security, Medicare, and so forth. And by the way, the link for that interview, if you missed it, it's a must-watch interview. You must absolutely see that, because there's nobody in this nation that knows the numbers better than David M. Walker. And so I'm going to post a link to that interview. If you've missed it, you can watch it, and you'll see exactly everything that he's saying. We're on path for a major crisis. So now let's talk about you. Let's talk about the impact of runaway government spending beyond inflation and beyond the depreciating U.S. dollar. Let's talk about taxes. Let's connect the dots, because the bulk of Americans, including you, have the bulk of their investable assets and their net worth contained where? In the taxable bucket and in the tax-deferred bucket. These are the two buckets that are the most vulnerable to rising tax rates. Now, never mind for a minute how that money's invested. I don't care if it's invested in gold or the Bitcoin trust or whatever else. It doesn't really matter. It could be invested in ARK ETFs, NFTs, whatever your fancy is. Set that aside for a minute and let's focus on the asset positioning, how that money's positioned from a tax perspective. So if you've got the bulk of your assets and the bulk of your net worth in these two areas, the taxable bucket and the tax deferred, and that describes most Americans, then you are a prime target for the destructive forces of skyrocketing taxes. Again, the solution for counteracting these destructive forces is proper asset positioning. And oh, by the way, that's one of the grading factors in the portfolio report card analysis that I do. Taxes. And we take a look at not just taxes, but also cost and diversification and risk and organization and behavior, all the key things that are influencing your portfolio's bottom line performance. But taxes are a big one. And this is an area where I see many investors continuing to make mistakes. You got to marry investment positioning with correct asset positioning. When you've got those two, I mean, it's a formidable framework for profitable investing. And so let me explain this other diagram, and I think this does a good job at explaining, what did they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words? Well, this one is taken from my upcoming yet-to-be-published book. This is going to be my 4th book. Yay for me. So I'm excited about it. You know, writing books, it's like having children. You know, once you start having one, it's sometimes, you know, those others just pop up and happen. But this particular diagram illustrates the relationship between asset positioning and investment positioning. They are not the same thing. You'll notice that asset positioning deals with how the money is spread across your 3 buckets, the taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free, whereas investment positioning deals with how that money is allocated or invested. So again, investment positioning is all about the asset allocation. Asset positioning is very different from asset allocation and investment positioning. Asset positioning, again, deals with just how that money is spread across those 3 buckets. And so I think this diagram hopefully explains that to you. And so everyone, including you, has what's called a mathematically ideal balance, or MIB, for their taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free buckets. Now, your MIB is going to be impacted by things like rental income or pension income if you have it. If you start collecting Social Security income or you're already collecting it, that's going to also impact your MIB, your RMDs, as well as any inheritance or maybe a windfall event like selling a business or selling a piece of property. That's all going to impact your MIB. Now, don't waste time Googling trying to figure out, well, what's my mathematically ideal balance? Because the online calculators all make the same mistake of assuming that you're going to be in the same or a lower tax bracket in the future, which simply is not the case. And what I find particularly misleading about these online calculators is how they're going to also simultaneously try to tabulate inflation, yet mistakenly ignore taxes by incorrectly assuming that tax rates aren't going to go up or tax rates are going to go down in retirement. When in reality, rising tax rates, that's the environment we're heading in because of all this government overspending. Rising tax rates is one of the most inflationary things an investor or retiree could ever face. And so your mathematically ideal balance, you have to get this right. What is it? Well, before I tell you, the first step is to properly diagnose your investments and figure out for yourself what is the structural strengths of my portfolio. What are the weaknesses? Do I have correct asset positioning? Do I have correct investment positioning? See, these are all the things that I do for you at portfolioreportcard.com. And after you've submitted your data, I can begin to analyze and grade your portfolio and get to the bottom of what's going on with your investments and to see if you're really properly positioned. Now, the key takeaways from today's show, and I hope you've enjoyed it because I have, is we've seen this post-COVID U.S. deficits. They're going to continue to grow. They are not going to stop. It's going to be like a freight train. The problem is it's growing faster than revenue. And so you're going to have deficit spending coupled with higher interest costs to the U.S. government, all this accumulated debt. It's a toxic combination. And the results of government spending is going to trigger skyrocketing taxes. They are not going to have any choice but to increase revenue. They can't print themselves out of this problem. They can't spend themselves out of this problem. They certainly can't borrow themselves out of this problem. And that leaves them with 2 unappetizing choices. You either reduce spending, which they're not very good at doing, and as you saw from those previous charts, spending is increasing, or you increase revenue, which is to increase taxes. And so now is the time to shelter yourself away from this by having correct asset positioning. Get your money into the tax-free zone. And so final questions, what's your MIB and are you ready? I'm trying to prepare these things and help you to prepare for what's coming. And are your investments correctly positioned? These are all things that you should be asking right now. You want to avert the nuclear bomb of skyrocketing taxes. And get in touch with me. I'll help you get to the bottom of some of these things that we've brought to light. Go to portfolioreportcard.com and get in touch with me. Well, thanks for watching today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to ETF Guide TV. I'm Ron DeLegge. I'll see you next time.